Oh, hello, good evening. Welcome. This is Ghana Tonight. We are live from a news hub at Desawe Kanda, also live on TV3 Ghana on Facebook, DSTV channel 279, all across the world on 3news.com. I am Alfred Okanse. Tonight, high expectations as President John Dramani Mahama announces first set of ministerial appointments. We'll hear from sectorial civil society groups and persons who have worked closely with these designated persons for the various ministries and what really this means for those sectors and their expectations as well. Stay with us. Also, the National Democratic Congress majority side in this 9th Parliament will have to decide on who to lead them in the House following the nomination of Dr. Kesla Tuforsing as Minister for Finance. But who could that be? Number of names already coming up. Stay with us. We have a conversation with a former majority leader for the NDC who understands how all of this works. Stay with us on Ghana Tonight. We have a conversation. Also, the Conference of Heads of Assisted Senior High Schools, that's CHAS, they have turned to parents and guardians to help with feeding students after several attempts failed to get funding from government. Stay with us. We have a conversation on this matter. A number of parents already reacting to this rather unfortunate development. But as always, you're an integral part of the conversation. Let's hear from you. The hashtag we're using is Ghana Tonight on Facebook and on X. Let's get the conversation going. Let's settle for Ghana Braves.
President John Dramani Mahama says his administration will not in any way impose further hardship on Ghanaians with doomsor. With just 2 days after kick-starting officially as president, his administration has been faced with an imminent power crisis. On his second day of work, he has given the firm assurance that Ghana will not be plunged into darkness.
Don't despair. Like I said, you elected us to solve the problems, not to put the blame on anybody else or to shoulder you with those problems.
The Minority Caucus in Parliament has called on President John Dramani Mahama to take decisive action against what they describe as a recent wave of lawlessness allegedly perpetrated by NDC loyalists. The caucus is demanding an immediate directive to law enforcement agencies to arrest and prosecute individuals involved in attacks on state institutions as well as public and private citizens.
In recent weeks, individuals believed to be loyalists of the National Democratic Congress, NDC, have unleashed acts of violence, intimidation, and anarchy that have left our citizens and institutions under siege. These carefully coordinated actions, far from protecting public interests, represent a dangerous descent into lawlessness.
The director of the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research, ISA, Professor Peter Quartey, has called on the finance minister nominee to prioritize collaboration with technocrats and adopt a consultative approach in carrying out his duties. President John Mahama earlier today nominated Dr. Kesla Tuforsing to serve as finance minister.
The finance ministry engages almost every key ministry and sector or subsector. It's not just about finance and investment, but also economic and social ramifications of government policies, tax policies, government programs. And therefore, he would have to also consult stakeholders, especially when they are going to introduce new policies or programs.
Trading activities have resumed at Katamanto Market 1 week after a devastating fire destroyed the entire market. While reconstruction work is still ongoing, some traders have begun selling under the incomplete structures.
I normally sell on only Thursdays. The unfortunate incident was the man who was just burnt to ashes, 59,000 Ghana. Our great-grandmothers were here years back. It was the train which were bringing the goods here. Before we came, we want to get our privacy over here.
Sudan's head coach, James Kwesi Appiah, has expressed his ambition to win the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations AFCON in Morocco. The Ghanaian tactician guided Sudan to qualification under challenging circumstances as the team played all their home games away from Sudan due to the ongoing civil war. Despite the adversity, the Falcons showcased resilience and determination, securing a place in the tournament at the expense of Ghana, from whom they claimed 4 points in the qualifiers.
Any competition that we go in, or any game that we're playing, we will make sure we go in all out, make sure we get a victory. I don't believe in the idea of taking part in a competition and then at the back of your mind you think, oh, we might go out in the first round. Or no. Once you're taking part, you aim for the cup.
Well, there's more news on 3news.com. Make some time and visit 3news.com. Coming up next here on Ghana Tonight, high expectations as President John Dramani Mahama announces first set of ministerial appointments. We hear from sectorial civil society groups what these appointments mean to their sectors. Stay with us on this. Well, earlier today, this was the communication that came through from the presidency, and it's one that we've stayed the steam on for the last at least 10 hours here on TV3. Take a look at this. As was widely speculated, and that is what has been indeed announced today, Dr. Kesla Toforsin, the current majority leader in this 9th Parliament, has been nominated as Finance Minister Designate. He comes into this office with some rich experience we're going to be getting into shortly. As former Deputy Finance Minister, he's not alone in the first set of appointments that have been announced by President John Dramani Mahama. John Abdullahi Jinapo, the Yape Kusor Member of Parliament, comes through as Minister for Energy Designate. Dominic Akuritinga Ayene is Attorney General and Minister for Justice Designate. He's not new to this particular position, although at that point deputizing. But this is the man who, for the next 4 years, that objective of President John Dramani Mahama in turning around the economy, resetting the economy, and then also getting the economy back on track with the macroeconomic growth and everything that he has targeted is going to be squarely on the shoulders of the Juma Kwesi Member of Parliament for the next 4 years. It's so confirmed by Parliament. And you've heard the minority already indicate that they are not going to stand in his way. At least that's what the minority leader said earlier today in Parliament. We're going to hear him shortly. But this is the man, Dr. Kesla Toforsin, an economist, chartered accountant, tax practitioner, has expertise in public finance, macroeconomics, fiscal policy, tax policy, business management. In fact, his education and also that history comes in quite clear, a lot really up his sleeves. And not just the education, but a lot of experience, 5-term lawmaker with extensive national and international exposure in finance. In fact, if you look at the profile of the various majority leaders that the NDC has nominated and in fact selected to lead them in Parliament, it's Dr. Kesla Toforsin. He's the only one that came through without a legal background. So he came through with experience as a lawmaker, leading the minority side in the 8th Parliament to win an election. There are many who have thought that, look, with everything that he's done, apart from the leadership he's shown in Parliament, he comes through with this experience as well in the finance ministry, having been the person who was indeed speaking for the NDC over the past 8-year period when it comes to matters of finance. Also on the finance committee at some point, and take a look at this. He's not alone in this. John Abdullah Jinapor, over the last 8-year period as well, he's been the voice that media, obviously, many would go to when it comes to getting the opposing side's view on matters of energy, on matters of oil and gas, and on matters that pertains to, for instance, natural resources. And we're getting pointers as to whether this ministry is going to remain this way or there's going to be an addition, as in natural resources being added to this particular ministry, or we'll see a review of the portfolio of this ministry, adding power to it. Because if we recall, in the ex-Wala Industry Administration, there was a minister for power who he deputized at that point. And so we're looking at how things are going to play out in the coming days. He has his work cut out for him. John Jinapor has his work cut out. Yesterday, you heard him speak. He understands the problem that we're faced with right now with the presentation that he did to the Chief of Staff and as well as the presidency to understand the current situation that we're dealing with the impending power crisis if nothing is done, with also the scheduled maintenance of the West African gas pipeline from January 20. Now, this is his profile, right on the table. Expert in energy, economics, finance, education, right there clearly. He has a lot coming onto the table beyond this. Talk about his reputation. He's known for hands-on experience and dynamic leadership in the energy sector. And the man that many refer to as the law, Dr. Dominic Ayeni, Attorney General, Minister for Justice designate. The many who indeed predicted that this was going to happen. And we here on Ghana Tonight put this out just about 2-3 weeks ago when we put out these pointers. And it appears that he indeed ticked the box for President John Mahama and what he intends to achieve as president in the Ministry of Justice and Attorney General for the next 4 years. Now, take a look at this. His legal expertise and academic prowess indeed comes through with extensive knowledge in constitutional and international law, and also his former Deputy Attorney General and Minister of Justice, as I indicated earlier, served as a member of Parliament for the Bogatanga East constituency. He is still serving as Member of Parliament for the Bogatanga East constituency. And then also, with all the educationals we see there, from the Stanford University, California, United States of America, PhD in law. That's Dr. Dominic Ayeni, with everything that he indeed comes through with. And for those of you who've been listening to him here and a number of things he's talked about here on TV3, you can understand the experience that he comes from this table with. Known for his in-depth legal expertise, eloquence, commitment to justice, and the rule of law. And you cannot even get bored listening to Dr. Dominic Ayeni talk about the law and espousing his position about the matters of law. Well, earlier today, the Speaker of Parliament, Right Honorable Alban Sumanakis for Bagman, put out these names, these first 3 names. The minority in Parliament had some reactions. And Alexander Penyomaken, who is a minority leader, had this to say. Take a look.
When the names were read out by Mr. Speaker, he read out only 3 names. This appointment is unacceptable. We expect them to be ready from day one. You cannot start energy, finance, attorney general. When are the rest of the ministers? You must be ready. We want to hear Ama Kofi Bua. We want to hear Agric. We want to hear Agric ministry. We want to hear roads and highways. We want to hear lands and natural resources.
Honorable Minority Leader.
Education.
So that's the minority leader, Alexander Fenyo, marking there. And with that position that he espoused, got a reaction of the majority side in Parliament later. Let's gauge the reactions of key players in the various sectors of these persons that have been nominated. Let's start off with the Energy Ministry. And John Abdullah Jinapor is Yape Koso, Member of Parliament. and the Minister for Energy designate, the man who has really worked closely with John Jinapor, is joining us on Zoom right now. Ben Boakye is Executive Director of the Africa Center for Energy Policy. Boakye, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us here on Ghana Tonight. I'm looking at, over the period, what you have done with John Jinapor, and hearing his name penned down for the Energy Ministry as a minister. How did that strike you?
No, I think it's not surprising. I mean, he's been at the man in charge. He has been in Parliament, the man in charge of energy. You know, as a ranking of the Mines and Energy Committee of Parliament, and he's been speaking for the NDC for the past 8 years. So even though there were other contenders and more also other experienced individuals in the space, it doesn't come as a surprise that he was the man who was chosen to actually lead the ministry.
It doesn't come as a surprise to you, but it's quite clear that his work is cut out already, is it not, with what we're faced with as we speak?
Absolutely. I mean, he has shown understanding of the sector and its challenges. We have had opportunity to discuss it on many, many occasions. He sees with the facts and the realities of the sector. So we can only hope that, you know, he will be able to deliver. And I've seen comments from him actually accepting the challenge to fix the energy sector challenges. So if he is lucky to have a collaborative Minister of Finance to quickly tackle the energy sector challenges, they should be able to address it. And I'm hoping that he would hit the ground running, focusing on you know, how he can address the challenges, particularly those that have to do with the distribution end, that is the ECG, and also the upstream sector where investments have declined over the years, and we need to come up with a new strategy to drive investment and bring money into the country. So I'm hoping that these two will be top on his priorities to be able to fix the energy sector challenges, because the upstream could bring revenues to also address the fiscal problems that we do have in Ghana, and also fixing ECG or downstream power sector would help you know, take the pressure off government for the recurrent injection of money into the distribution of electricity.
So you talk about fixing ECG. We heard yesterday the President, John Mahama, indicates that the privatization of the distribution part of the chain is still not off the table, that is going to activate conversations about the restoration of that Millennium Challenge Corporation money of over 190 million that we lost in the actual administration, and all the matters relating to PDS. Now, what kind of energy sector is John Jinapor going to inherit if it's so confirmed by Parliament in the coming days?
No, we are told that there is over 2.5 billion debt outstanding, which is just the tip of the iceberg. The reality also is that on a monthly basis, more debt are created because of the under-recoveries in the sector. So we are not looking at just 2.5 billion plus. In my estimation, it's way more than that. If you look at judgment debts and other debts that I don't see in the books, it could be more than the 2.5 billion. But those are debts. But there are debts that are created on a daily basis, monthly basis, that we need to have a handle on. And keeping ECG current should be the topmost priority. If he's able to deal with the debt accumulation, then you have the freedom to now think how you address the outstanding debt. Other than that, we're going to be struggling to handle the energy sector challenges, because you're always creating more debt. The sector is creating more debt, and it could grow up to 2 billion a year. So if you add in 2 billion every year and you can't address it, government will have to sacrifice the budget to be able to intervene.
So you talk about government sacrificing the budget, and this would then lead us to the conversation about the finance minister designate. But before I let you go, Mr. Boakye, with what we're faced with now, and the fact that the president has decided, in fact, to now engage the West African Gas Pipeline Company to possibly extend the maintenance schedule again for maybe a possible 2 weeks, so as to give some time to be able to deal with what we're faced with right now because of that postponement of the scheduled maintenance from October last year to January this year at the instance of the former Energy Ministry under the former President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. What is the extent of the dire situation that we're faced with now from where you sit and from the data available to you?
Now, we have seen many of those in the past years. There has been many shutdowns, maintenances here and there, taking power. Nobody talks about it. I mean, even when you talk about it, the government will not admit. So the fact that there's a change of government and they want to avoid the narrative that they are here to bring doomsday, and I think that's what is creating the euphoria. But other than that, we've seen the West Africa pipeline shut down before. We've seen no fuel in the Eastern Enclave before and gone through these challenges. So we just have to be sober and think through how we practically deal with it so that, one, we are not creating more debt, because as I indicated, power to the ECG, you're not going to get your money back. So if government goes to buy whatever fuel is debt, how do we mitigate, these challenges without creating more debt? I mean, it's understandable that at this point government will have to intervene, but to what level? We have to be measured in the way we do it. I think that some minimal amount of shedding should be allowed, whilst they get some HFO and liquids to run some turbines to stabilize the grid, keep the grid active, because if you shut down the entire Eastern Enclave, it will create instability in the grid. But the amount of energy required to stabilize the grid, we need to put that on and get the liquid fuels to do that, whilst we fix the gas supply. Gas is the cheapest fuel for us, and therefore the less debt you create when you consume gas, even with all the inefficiencies. So I'm hoping that we'll be sober in reflecting on these things and not create a lot more debt in this situation.
We'll see how things play out in the coming days. But Mr. Boakye, thank you. Ben Boakye is Executive Director of the Africa Center for Energy Policy, one of the foremost energy CSOs we have in this country, talking about expectations of John Jinapor eventually confirmed as Energy Minister. But on the matter of the situation we're faced with right now, that is the possible doomsday or the erratic power supply in the coming days if nothing is done urgently. John Mahama says there's a situation that he has inherited. He's not going to give excuses. He's going to tackle it because that's what he was elected for. Take a look.
The president marked his first public engagement outside of the seat of government since his inauguration by attending the National Convention of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Mission in Pumadzi of the Central Region, themed Justice and Peace, the essential ingredient for national development. The president used the occasion to outline his administration's vision and address key national concerns.
I would soon establish a committee to begin the planning of a national constitutional review validation conference to achieve broad consensus on the way forward for the constitutional amendments that we have all proposed. I'm going to set up a planning committee to start working on the National Education Review Conference that I promised. This conference will review our educational system right from the kindergarten through the basic to secondary to tertiary to technical, vocational education, and identify what the hindrances to quality education are at each level of our educational system. I believe that this conference will come out with new ideas in order to provide us the outcomes that we need as a nation.
He assured Ghanaians of his government's unwavering commitment to resolving the energy crisis and prevent a return to the era of doomsong.
Don't despair. Like I said, you elected us to solve the problems, not to put the blame on anybody else or to shoulder you with those problems.
With agriculture.
So that's the position of President John Dramani Mahama on this matter of the impending situation that we're having to deal with. But let's shift our focus to the next person. That's the second of the three whose names were mentioned today as ministers designates. That's Dominic Ayeni, Dr. Dominic Ayeni for the Minister of Justice and Attorney General. That's a designate. Let's connect with private legal practitioner and a member of the Operation Recover All Loot preparatory team, Martin Pebble, joining us on Zoom right now. Counsel, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us here on Ghana Tonight. You know Dr. Dominic Ayeni quite well. You've done a number of cases with him, and possibly confirm this for me if he taught you. But how does this nomination of him to the Attorney General's office to head that ministry strike you?
Okay, so it's a good nomination, to put it mildly. Yeah, there can be a richer word for it. Yes, he's quite competent for the job. Yes, quite competent for the job based on my previous interactions with him, okay? Yeah, and it wasn't surprising. I'll come back to the competencies a bit. It wasn't surprising because, you know, he was Deputy Attorney General the last time NDC was in office, especially the second term, right? Yeah, don't know if it was all the 8 years. Yeah. So having been in that office, it's not that surprising that now he's risen to the substantive minister. So from deputy to substantive. Now, I mentioned the competence, which is the core thing. We'll come to other, criteria for this appointment, but the thing being the competence, it's very important because, you know, that's the core of the matter. You know, the nation is yearning for very competent ministers who can get the job done quickly, etc. So it's okay, to put it mildly once again, that he's been given the position. And today I'm using the milder words because as Ghanaians, we are learning, right? So we don't want to start extolling the virtues of the person too much or giving too much praise, singing, etc. at the beginning. Let's wait to give that verdict at the end. Yes, so on paper and in practice, it's qualified, but the better judgment will come at the end of his tenure. Then we can look at what he did in office. That should be where the emphasis should go. Because, you know, when you mention Ayeni has been a law teacher. He taught until he stopped. He had taught for at least 15 years, yes, before he finally stopped teaching. So if you ask lots of lawyers, to the extent that Ayeni taught so many of us, you would hardly say he's not qualified for the job. Very few lecturers would not be qualified, you see, because you would have to learn the law and a lot of the time practice it to be able to impact onto others, right? And Ayeni taught well, so we can't say he's not competent. But like I said, for grading that as to how well he'll perform in the office, we will reserve judgment, and that's very important. That will reserve judgment for him to come into office and perform. Then when he's exiting, we can then give praise where it is due. But at the beginning, at the point of entry, this is not the time for praise at all. You know, we all know too well many persons who came into office with excellent qualifications, but they didn't do quite well in office. So because of that, that's why I said we are learning. I'll wait, reserve judgment to the end.
And in fact, that's a position that a number of persons would also align to. We will see. And indeed, as the coming days would be, and then also the entire process of his vetting and the matters that will come up as well. Thank you very much, Lawyer Martin Pebble, for your thoughts on this. I think your point is well made, clearly. And we'll have a conversation in the coming days. Thank you. Martin Pebo is a private legal practitioner. He's one of the foremost constitutional lawyers we have in this country. He's a member of the Operation Recover All Loot preparatory team. Thank you for joining us. But on the matter of finance, Dr. Kesela Tufor-Singh, a former deputy finance minister, if you look at all three persons who were named today, they've all deputized in these ministries before. So they're coming in with that rich experience of knowing how things work out. But they are coming at a time as well in the different scheme of things when you look at the larger picture of the various sectors that they are going into. And the economy is the major one. And the finance minister has the sole responsibility to carry out and execute and eventually achieve that objective of President John Mahama to reset this economy. And Dr. Kesela Tufor-Singh is the one who has been nominated to do this. And I sat with him some time ago to get his understanding of what we're faced with and the kind of economy that he would want to inherit, and his understanding of the challenge when it comes to the economic situation that we were faced with and what he has inherited. Take a look. What are the implications of a situation like this?
It's terrible. I mean, we don't wish that. We don't wish that for our country. We want Ghana to do well. We want to inherit a good economy. We want to come to government and be able to do what we have promised the people of Ghana. But unfortunately, this is a government that has run the Ghanaian economy aground to a point of no return. To take us years, they themselves have announced that to take us up to 10 years for Ghana to recover, and clearly. So they have raised all the gains. International image of the people of the Republic of Ghana is gone. The reputation that has been built over the years is completely gone, completely gone. This is a country that everybody loves. This is a country that was once seen as the hope for Africa. Today, we've now become a laughingstock, and people are referencing Ghana as a country that has defaulted, and unfortunately, a case study that Africa has never seen before. Okay, and when you are confronted with a situation like that, where you are not in a position to repay your debt, you have to put the brakes. Let me tell you another thing that probably you are not aware. The entire tax revenue we raise in this economy is not enough to service our debt and to pay for wages and salaries. It's not enough. In fact, you require over 50% of your revenue only to service your interest. Interest only, over 50%. So I think the numbers are almost about 62%. And then if you are to add amortizations, debt repayment itself, you are hitting close to 80%. That, the remaining 20% is not enough to pay the wages and salaries of government workers.
Would you recommend a ceiling or capping for borrowing by government at this time?
Okay, so, and that is why some of us want the IMF program to start early, because the IMF program itself will impose some ceilings.
Ceiling on borrowing?
Yes, certainly, particularly on non-concessional borrowings. The IMF program in itself would do that. But let me make this point also. I think Ghana has missed a golden opportunity to correct the mess that this economy has gone through under President Akufo-Addo.
Well, that's the finance minister designate, Dr. Kesela Tufor-Singh, there in that interview I had with him earlier, some time ago. It's just about over a year ago when he made this particular comment, and also analyzing the kind of economy that eventually, if NDC won, they're going to inherit, and you heard him there. Well, his nomination as finance minister designate has then created another situation in Parliament. That's for the leadership of the NDC. That's our next conversation. That's coming up next year on Ghana Tonight. The National Democratic Congress majority side of the House will have to decide on who to lead them in the House following the appointment, that's the nomination of Dr. Kesela Tufor-Singh. as Minister Designate for the Finance Ministry. But who could that be, and what qualities should they look out for? This is a very interesting time. It's an interesting conversation we're going to be having shortly. You want to stay with us. And prior to this moment, this is how the leadership of Parliament, that's the majority side, looked like, the majority caucus in this 9th Parliament. Dr. Kesela Tuforsin, the Jumakon Enyan Esiam constituency member of Parliament, was the majority leader, or is still the majority leader, until eventually appointed as Minister for Finance after the vetting and eventual approval of the plenary in this 9th Parliament. Emmanuel Amakofibwa is the Deputy Majority Leader, MP for Elembele constituency, governs Kwame Agboja, MP for Adaklu, Majority Chief. In fact, we're also monitoring him quite closely because we're getting some pointers that he could also be named for another ministry that's governs Kwame Agboja as one of the ministers in the coming days for one of the ministries that we have eyes on. So if that happens as well, it's a conversation that we're going to get into, but stay with us on this. And then also we have Ahmed Ibrahim, the Member of Parliament for the Banda constituency, as the first Deputy Majority Chief Whip, and then also my Member of Parliament, Comfort Doyo Kujo, as the second Deputy Majority Chief Whip. Well, with what has happened now, effectively, this particular position, a conversation would have to be had by the leadership of the NDC and also the majority caucus of the NDC in this 9th Parliament. Who becomes the next majority leader is a conversation that already has started. And some names have come up already, which we'll get into. But shortly, we'll be joined by a former majority leader of the NDC, that's when the NDC was in the majority, who understands what goes into choosing who a majority leader is and what he expects would be the consideration of who should be the majority leader to replace Dr. Kesela Tuforsin in the coming weeks. And that's the Honorable Cletus Avoka. He's going to be joining us on Zoom in a bit. But if you look at how things have played out over the period, over the previous parliaments till date, the NDC, whenever they're in the majority, these are the majority leaders they have had in the past. You know, follow me closely. Cletus Avoka, the Honorable Cletus Avoka, who's going to be joining us shortly, has been a majority leader before, who understands the workings of this particular parliament that we're talking about. Former Zebula Member of Parliament, also won the Garutimpane constituency as an independent candidate. He was a majority leader at some point, and then also he was a minister in charge of lands and natural resources at some point, as well as the interior minister. Dr. Benjamin Kumbo as well, he has been a majority leader on the ticket of the NDC before, the Laura Nandom constituency MP, former defense minister, and then also at some point Minister of Health as well, and the Minister of Attorney General, of Justice and Attorney General as well at some point. And then Alban Sumana Kingsford Bagbin, the current Speaker of Parliament, was also at some point a majority leader as well in Parliament for the NDC, and also the Member of Parliament for the Nadole Kaleo constituency, former Health Minister, is now the Speaker of this 9th Parliament, one of 2 speakers to have a second term. So also there's a lot of history at play for him as well. Haruna Idrisu, the former majority leader as well, who was replaced by Dr. Kesela Tuforsin, who's the current majority leader. And if you look at these 5 persons, there's one thing that flows through all of them. You have those who served at least 3 terms before they became majority leaders. Also, apart from Dr. Kesela Tuforsin, all these persons, I'm talking about Cletus Avoka, Dr. Benjamin Kombo, Alban Sumana Kingsford Bagbin, and Haruna Idrisu, all have legal backgrounds. All of them, except Dr. Kesela Tuforsin, who came into that position as a majority leader with a finance and economics background, and also had help from his deputies who had legal backgrounds as well. So you can understand the kinds of consideration that goes to it. Just one of few that we have just pointed out. But the man who understands this, he's been there before. The Honorable Cletus Avoka is joining us on Zoom right now. I thank you so much for joining us here on Ghana Tonight. I'm sure you are enjoying your retirement as Member of Parliament. But then again, I appreciate you staying up to join us here on Ghana Tonight. First off, with this situation that this majority of the NDC in this 9th Parliament is faced with, from where you sit, how can the leadership of this majority, and by extension the party, deal with this particular situation right now?
Good evening to all your viewers. First and foremost, let me congratulate my very good friend, Honorable Dr. Ato Forson, for his nomination as Minister for Finance. I think it's a position that he deserves so much. You know, if you are a majority leader and you lead your party in an election year to a landslide victory, I think it's a great achievement that you ought to be rewarded. And besides that, that is his background, the finance is his background, and he has been very, very critical of the previous regime, and that has enabled NDC to win so well in the general elections. So I think he deserves his appointment as the finance minister designate. I'm only hopeful that the appointments committee that are going to do the vetting will approve of him, will recommend him to the House for approval in due course. I congratulate him in advance. Now, having said that, yes, admittedly, now that the majority leader Ato Forson has left the scene, somebody will have to fill the vacancy. I'm happy that the NDC has a lot of MPs who are very qualified and competent in the House now to be able to fill that vacancy. There are about 183 members of Parliament, albeit about half of them or so being new members of Parliament. But the continuing members of Parliament are many enough, and I'm confident that they will get somebody to replace Dr. Ato Forson effectively. The criteria for a leader of the House is very, very diversified. A lot is expected of a leader. First and foremost, your personal standing is very, very critical. What is your habit? What is your nature? What are your characteristics? That is very important. Secondly, a leader must be able to command the respect of the two sides of the House. A leader must be able to command the respect of the two sides of the House. That is the majority side and the minority side. So the NDC majority will be looking for somebody who commands the respect of the two sides of the House, and particularly who commands the respect of his caucus, the majority caucus. A leader must be somebody who understands the Constitution and the standard orders of Parliament very, very well. If you are a leader, at least at every material time, when you are up on your feet, you should be able to address issues concerning the Constitution or the standard orders of the Parliament of Ghana. So a leader is somebody who must be conversant and with the Constitution and then the standard orders. If you are not very conversant, then you must be able to, on the spell of the moment, make reference to the Constitution and the standard orders, and then make your point. A leader must be somebody who is a team player. You must be a team player. In other words, even if with your large majority on the side of the NDC, you still need to build consensus on the minority side or with the minority caucus. So a leader must be somebody who should be a team player, who should be accessible and approachable by both sides of the House, and particularly who should be accessible to the backbench. I recall that when I was made leader of the House in 2009, when I got to the House, I discovered that they had formed what they call backbenchers caucus. And then when I inquired, they said that they had lost contact with the leadership, with the caucus leadership, and that is why they were forming their own backbenchers caucus. Of course, I did my best to dissolve it and then to bring them together, because I said that you cannot have a divided House. Fortunately, the new standing order that we adopted last year have made provision for backbenchers caucus. And the backbenchers caucus is for the Speaker and then the leadership to acknowledge them, and then to give them opportunity to also make their presence in the House felt, to also have opportunity to debate, make statements, and the rest of them. So we now have the backbenchers caucus. So that shouldn't be very difficult for a leader. So a majority leader must be somebody who is selfless. He must be very, very selfless. and you are also an administrator. So outside Parliament, you have to take care of the welfare of members of your caucus, or in fact, the entire caucus, and especially your caucus, you have to take care of them. And then in the chamber too, you have to be able to, at the spell of the moment, bring your caucus together to do government business. And then the leader must be somebody who must be disciplined. If you exhibit discipline yourself, then you see that your backbench or those behind you will be disciplined. What I mean by discipline is that if it is time for sitting, the leader is in the chamber. If it is time for a particular exercise or event, the leader is there to lead. But if you are a leader who is late to the chamber and a leader who, when they want to have access to him, they cannot have access to him, then you have challenges. So there are so many requirements for a leader, but I'm confident that given the material that the NDC has in the House today, they can get a very competent leader. Normally, it's advisable to have a lawyer who is a leader because Parliament is a lawmaking body. Of course, even if he's not a lawyer, then his deputy, the deputy majority leader, must have some legal background so that he can assist when the issues of law are raised.
I see, because you make a very critical point about the legal background. And I pointed out earlier that all of you who have been majority leaders for the NDC, anytime you're in the majority, you all had some legal background except Dr. Kesela Tufor-Singh, who did not, but then again had support from his deputy. So it's a critical point that you make that as well. But beyond what you have said, with all of these qualities of being a team player and so on, you have been there. You know the nuances that are not written on paper, right? As the considerations for who becomes the majority leader. From where you sit and from your experience, the party would have to take a decision. And considering the kind of parliament that you have now, what should they be looking for beyond what you have just stated?
Well, there are so many factors of consideration to take into account in arriving at who should be a leader. It might be somebody who has been in Parliament for at least 2 terms, if not more. That means you must know the 4 corners of Parliament House. You must know the terrain of Parliament. You must know the staff of Parliament and then the caucus that you are going to handle. So that is one of the weapons that a good leader must have, that he knows Parliament in and out, that he's not a one-term parliamentarian, somebody who has been there just 1 term or so. At least 2 terms minimum or more is an advantage. And then somebody with a legal background is an added advantage. I recall that a few leaders have not been lawyers before, but there are those who have gained experience and knowledge, and those who have applied themselves to the Constitution and the standing orders and were not found wanting. And besides that, their deputies were lawyers who assisted them anytime that legal matters were raised. Honorable Oseche Mensah also did very well, even though he was not a lawyer. Our first leader of the Fourth Republic, that is the first parliament of the Fourth Republic, who's a champion of blessed memory. He was not a lawyer, but he did very well as a leader of the House. So yes, admittedly, if you have a legal background, it's an added advantage. But if you don't have that, you must have a very strong experience in the House and then a very strong interest in the Constitution and standing orders of Parliament, so that you learn very fast and apply them very well. You must have a deputy who must be able to be supporting you. We should be looking at the regional balance too. The president has started appointing ministers of state. You know, politics is what we mean by, in politics we mean the participatory democracy. That's the meaning of politics, participatory democracy. That means all hands on deck. So you realize that when they are going to form the leadership of the House, they will look at the regions of the country. Which region has not been taken care of politically, and therefore will try to balance that in Parliament. And if that region does not get the leadership, they may have somebody in the front bench so that they don't complain that they are not part of the political process. So many things have to be taken into account. But as I said, the character of the fellow is very, very important. His stamina is important. His personal knowledge is important. And then he must be a team player. He must be somebody respected by the 2 sides of the caucus, and he must be accessible and approachable. These are the qualities of a good leader, and I expect that the NDC leadership will look at somebody who has these qualities, or at least some of these qualities, to be able to make him the leader of the House. And as I said earlier, there are many members of parliament in the NDC as at now. Some of them are third-term parliamentarians, others are fourth or even fifth term. And any one of them, I think, with the support of the rest of the caucus, can provide the leadership.
I just appreciate your time on this, and thank you very much for your thoughts. I mean, from somebody who has been there, you've seen it, you've done it, and you know the consideration that goes into the selection of who becomes the leader of the majority in the House for the NDC. Thank you, the Honorable Cletus Avoka, former Zebela Member of Parliament. He voluntarily stepped aside. He didn't contest this election last year. He served in 2 constituencies. He's one of the experienced members of Parliament that we had until his exit, together with the likes of the Speaker of Parliament now, and then also the Honorable Collins Dauda, one of the experienced ones that we have. I thank you so much, the Honorable Cletus Avoka. But earlier today, when this matter of the Dr. Kesla Tuforsen's the selection or nomination as the Finance Minister designate came up, the minority side also had a say on the debate on who becomes the possible replacement for Dr. Kesla Tuforsen. That's the minority leader, as Alexander Penyomakin, again putting out his own names. Take a look.
Kwame Agboja is going to roads and highways. Yeah, we know Ahmed Ibrahim is going to local government. And a lot of you will remain at the backbench. Honorable Achampo, Mr. Speaker, he has done so well. Yes. I will be surprised if he's not sent to the Ministry of Finance as deputy. I will be surprised. I will be surprised. And Dr. Apak is definitely going to education as deputy education minister. Mr. Speaker, we know. That's why I know Honorable Ayariga is going to assume the black chair. And his deputy is my good friend, Kweku Rickett. Because, yes, Kweku is going to be the deputy minority leader.
Well, so that's Alexander Penyomakin's own proposals and how he expects the NDC majority to respond to this vacancy. Well, these are some of the names that have come up already for this position, and this is in no particular order, okay? Roxy Nelson Dafiamepo, the South Dai Member of Parliament, is private legal practitioner. But you've heard him talk so many times about the happenings with the NDC and some of these contested seats after the 7th December 2024 elections. Governor Kwame Agboja is a member of the leadership of this 9th Parliament for the NDC, the majority caucus of the NDC. He is in there as well as one of the names that has come up as well, the majority chief whip. Now, Mahama Yariga as well, is a member of Parliament for the Boko Central constituency. Many who had tipped him for the Attorney General and Minister of Justice position. But with the announcement today of Dr. Dominic Ayeni, some have thrown his name into this pool of persons to possibly be a majority leader. Now, Haruna Idrisu was a minority leader. He has not occupied that position of a majority leader. So some have also thrown his name in there as a possible consideration, the Tamale South Member of Parliament. But there are strong positions or strong doubts about him as to whether that is indeed going to be one that he would even consider if he is called upon, because he has once led this side in Parliament as the minority leader. Earlier, we have put his name up as part of the persons who had occupied the majority leadership position. That's not the case. He's been minority leader in this, that's for the NDC in the 8th Parliament. But as we see now, his name has come up as to whether it's one that, if he is approached, he would consider it's a conversation that can be had. Also, George Kweku Rickett Hagan, also a former Deputy Finance Minister, MP for Cape Coast South. Well, his name has come up as well as a possible replacement as well, or one that would be chosen to be part of the leadership, not probably the majority leader, but the leadership of the NDC, because it appears that if the appointments eventually come out in full, there may be other persons in the current composition of the leadership of the NDC caucus in this parliament who would be selected as members of parliament, that's as ministers, beg your pardon. Emmanuel Amakofibua Elembele, member of parliament, who is the deputy majority leader now, is also, his name has come up, and naturally you would expect that as deputizing Dr. Kesla Tuforsin, his name will be part of the persons being considered as possible replacements for the majority leadership position. We'll see how things play out, but that's the sole responsibility of the NDC as a political party and the majority caucus in this 9th parliament. We're back shortly after this quick break. Stay with us.
This is the reason why I love Ghana. Get the luxury aquarium.
Take a look at this. More names adding up as we speak. And Mohammed Muntaka Mubarak has been a deputy leader for the NDC, deputizing Haruna Idrisu at the time. They were both changed when that rather controversial decision was taken, but played out well for the party a couple of years ago. In fact, Dr. Zaneto Ajiban Rawlings' name has come up as well for that gender factor, and we'll see how things play out. It is, as I indicated, a sole decision that the NDC as a political party will take. But these are the names that are coming up. And in fact, the names keep increasing. The list keeps increasing by the minute. But then again, that tells you, as you heard the Honorable Cletus Avoka indicate, there are so many qualified persons who can and will replace Dr. Kesla Tuforsin as a majority leader in this 9th Parliament. And same as President John Mahama also saying he's received thousands of CVs, but he also just has to appoint just 60 ministers. That's a Herculean task. We'll see how, and also monitoring how the appointment process will be and the announcements in the coming days. I thank you so much for staying with us here on Ghana Tonight. Join us same time tomorrow for another conversation. My name is Alfredo Kansi. Have a good night.
Ghana Tonight is brought to you by
Flamingo Paint. Superior durability, superior hiding, superior coverage, simply superior.